Hey, what's up? I've just reorganized my home studio, and it seemed like a good time to go over where my DAW-Less setup is at, why it's not really a DAW-Less setup, and why you might benefit from this kind of hybrid situation. As a disclaimer, I've really always considered my home studio to be a bit scrappy in all honesty. I'm truly just kind of making things up as I go along, and there's no pressure for me as long as I'm happy with how my music sounds, happy with my workflow and where I'm at, and content with all of my gear. I just wanted to say that since synths and electronic music, like many other hobbies on the internet, are pretty heavily gatekeeped. So here's my little setup. It might be modest to some, it might be excessive to others, but for me, it's exactly what I need now and where I'm really comfortable, to be honest. I have this really inexpensive L desk from Wayfair. I have a hutch piece that is supposed to go on top of the main desktop behind me, but I took off the L piece that's attached to that part, and I'm using that as the side piece because of the way it fits together in this space. It just made more sense for me. So now that we've talked desks, let's get into the fun part. For synths, I have my Korg Minilog XD on one side and my Electron Digatone on the other. These two synths honestly complement each other more perfectly than any other two synths I could imagine, or at least like an analog and an FM synth. They just work really well together. They're great at accomplishing different goals, and I'm going to talk about what I do with each one just a little bit. The Digatone can get incredibly experimental really quickly, but it's really easy to kind of reel back and make soft and still complicated and evolving pad sounds. If you've seen my videos, you know that's what I do with it. Or you can get absolutely crazy. The sky is really the limit based on the way that FM architecture is implemented within the Electron workflow. And furthermore, just how all the parameter pages are set up. It's really easy to overlook how something as simple as user interface can have such a heavy effect on the sound design that results from it. But yeah, quick rundown if you're not familiar. It is an 8-voice polyphonic FM synthesizer, and it is housed in a box that has a complete sequencer. Electron sequencer is really great. It's based on a 64-step sequencer that can really be expanded much beyond that. You can link and chain patterns together. There's a song mode. The sequencer is so feature heavy that you could even describe the Digatone as a sequencer with a synth engine inside of it. And the Korg Minilog XD. I love the Minilog for the exact same, but kind of opposite reason that I love the Digatone. It's my old faithful, even though it's my newest instrument. I know how to make it do a ton of things really efficiently. It's quick to navigate. It's simple. It's mostly knob per function, but on the contrary, it actually has a ton of potential for really experimental sound design. This is in part due to the multi-engine oscillator and some of the user effects and user oscillators that you can implement. But to be honest, it gets weird for the same reason that the Digatone does, which is the synth architecture itself, the physical layout of the knobs and how the signal is routed. There are a few options that you wouldn't expect to necessarily find on an analog synth at this price point and that budget, and you can do some really cool stuff with it, which again, I've explored in a bunch of videos. I will link some up. I'll throw cards up so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about with a tutorial example. And although it's the newest instrument in my setup, it's actually the one that I'm probably closest to upgrading in the future. I'll probably keep it around, but it's my first analog polysynth, and it kind of got me in tune with what I actually truly want out of an analog style flagship synth. Oh, and as an aside, all of this gear I bought myself used or discounted, aside from a couple of guitar pedals, which I'll talk about later. You know, this isn't the cheapest hobby, but there are definitely ways to make it more affordable. You can budget, you can set aside money, sell gear you don't use. It's doable. On to samplers. No surprises here. We have more Electron stuff. You might be asking why I have so much Electron stuff, and you might think it's a little bit excessive because of the overlap. And there definitely is overlap, but the way I approach my setup in terms of how intentional I am with where I use each specific device, it provides me with comfort and certainty that I'm never going to hit a wall in terms of voice allocation, tracks, sample slots, things like that. I have plenty of headroom in a way that makes it feel like I don't really have that sort of limitation when using hardware. And it allows me to assign each sampler specifically a specific task. So the Digitact actually started all of this for me, to be honest. I really did spend quite a bit of time learning the ins and outs of the Digitact and how the Electron sequence-based workflow could really complement my music making style. It serves my music and it makes it worthwhile for me. And I'm careful not to say that I have mastered or I'm an expert at the Digitact in any means. I just know how to make it do what I need it to do for my purposes. I've said it before and I'll say it again, your gear should serve you, you should not serve your gear. I actually think having learned modular synthesis opened up the possibilities of the Digitact for me. So there are 8 voices that are kind of routed through this architecture with all of the parameter pages. And I really kind of started to think of each of those sample voices as a sample-based voice in modular with a set signal path. But each page on the Digitact is essentially a module of its own. And then the LFO page has multiple LFOs, and you can send it to other modules. And it kind of broke me out of perceiving a 64-step sequence-based workflow as being rigid, because the sky's the limit with all of those routing options, right? And being able to parameter lock pretty much any parameter on any page to a specific step, including the actual sample that's being played. It just allows so much flexibility. Moving on to the Octatrack. Ooh boy, we'll try to keep it simple here, because I could talk about this for hours, which I have already done on the channel, and will definitely continue to do so in the future. But yeah, the Octatrack can do most everything the Digitact can do, but it can also do it to incoming audio. One of the crazy and great things about the Octatrack is its ability to manipulate incoming audio by setting up parameters to affect and rearrange the audio before it's even recorded. That's why it's called a dynamic performance sampler. It's very complicated and it's not easy to navigate until you learn the interface and the language used to refer to all the different things going on, but having familiarity with Electron's workflow in general really helps with the process. Recently, I've been preferring the Octatrack over the Digitact because of its sort of self-contained ability to act as an effects performer. The Digitact has a few tricks up its sleeve, yeah, but the Octatrack was designed to do that, and that's just where I'm at with my music right now. So let's talk about some basic routing. I have some basic cabling set up for like a default routing in a template project. I haven't bothered with MIDI stuff yet because those cables are in a rat's nest upstairs. But basically I have my Digatone running into the Digitact, and those both go into the Octatrack as one stereo pair. I also have the Minilog XD running into some effects pedals and then have that running into a single input of the Octatrack. I don't know why, but I'm currently really enjoying running the Minilog through effects more so than any other synth or sampler right now. I've currently been running it through the Chase Bliss Audio Thermae alone and just playing it until I find an unexpected pattern that I like, and then recording that sample into the Octatrack to save and mess around with later. I also have the Hologram Electronics Microcosm and the Chase Bliss GenLoss Mark II, and I'm thinking that I actually might run those through the queue out of the Octatrack to do sort of like effect sends, and I actually have a video tutorial on how I set that up as well. I have all of this running into the 1010 Blue Box mixer, and it's a great little mixer, which again, I bought used on Reverb for not that bad of a price for what it is. And I usually have 3 stereo input pairs that I run into it for tracking, but sometimes I honestly just run everything into the Octatrack and will have one input into the Blue Box because I primarily got the Blue Box to route audio out of it. So I have audio sent to my monitors, my headphones, and to my DAW. Monitors are PreSonus Aris, I think it's called. I got them like 9 years ago when I was working at a music shop, which is crazy. They were like $100 and I've had them forever. But yeah, that DAW that I mentioned, I have things being sent to. Therein lies the hybrid setup. What's important to note here when I say hybrid setup is that all of the upfront creative process stuff, the writing, the beat making, the melody making, the tracking, that all happens as part of the sequencing-based workflow. Sometimes I'll record samples as WAV files in Logic and then export them, but most of the times I'm sampling directly to the Electron devices. That said, the signal path from this DAW-Less setup always plops itself right into a DAW. And like I said, I use Logic. I always want to record what I'm making, and I try to be in the habit of having a project file running whenever I'm kind of working on developing sounds, because I love sampling weird moments that come out of a 30-second ambient noise disaster. I can find a nice snippet, chop it up, and then export it into one of the samplers. It's an incredibly easy way to sort of document my whole process and make sure that those little serendipitous sounds, those happy accidents, are always being recorded. Don't get me wrong, I love DAW-lessly bringing an instrument with me, like the Digitact or the Octatrack, you know, when I go visit my family for a weekend or if I'm traveling, and it's fun to have that self-contained device experience. But once you get to a more complicated setup where you're routing things here and there, I think it's just as easy to have running everything into a digital audio workstation. Easy in terms of the process of doing it, and easy in terms of the monetary restraints. If you have a Mac, GarageBand is free. And if you have a PC, I'm sure there are a ton of decent free options, if not just free trial options for Windows as well. There's probably a free DAW trial coupon in the last box of cereal you bought. And no, that was not a Fruity Loops joke. Oh, I almost forgot. Here are a few of my guitars and my beloved Princeton reverb. Since I haven't been playing in a band, they honestly haven't had as much use recently, and I feel bad, but I like to keep them out so they're more accessible and it's more likely that I'll just kind of fiddle around with them. I do still tinker around and use them for sample making and recording. I primarily use my Telecaster. Interestingly, I think my Strat is more comfortable to play, fits my hands better, but the neck pickup on a Tele, specifically this one, is just my favorite bass guitar tone ever. So yeah, while I'm in this sort of temporary setup in the last few months before I moved to Portland, I've plopped this setup in my living room, and I'm going to try to make as much DAW-lessly, DAW-ful music as I possibly can. I think the process of sort of resetting Sorry, dog shook off. I think this process of having reset up everything has my brain thinking about how I want to physically space things out when I move to Portland. And I plan on getting like a 6-foot desk because I do really like having everything set up in a straight line. And until then, I'm really excited to having this set up in my living room where it's super accessible to me and I can just kind of mess around with it at a moment's notice. It's really great, as I've said before, to just reduce the amount of friction that exists between you and making music. So yeah, hopefully you'll be hearing lots from me in the next few months. And definitely let me know if you have any questions about your own DAW-Less setup, where to start, what a good next step would be, what piece of gear you might need to kind of fill in that missing link to connect everything together. If you enjoyed this video, definitely check out my Patreon if you want some more content from me. I'm also pretty active on Instagram if you want to drop by and say hello, see stupid pictures of my dog, and get music recommendations. Always mucking about over there. So yeah, thanks so much for joining, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.